My affection for Caleb has been present since our early childhood days. We grew up as next-door neighbors, and our bond as constant playmates was as organic as it could be. It was only natural that we evolved into best friends. Caleb resided with his grandparents, and it seemed he relished the idea of being part of a typical family dynamic. I wholeheartedly welcomed him into my world, even allowing him to partake in my dollhouse games. In return, he introduced me to the world of baseball and taught me how to play. We embarked on numerous adventures, cycling through the neighborhood, flying kites, and engaging in imaginative games of princesses and monsters. In my eyes, Caleb was always my gallant knight in shining armor, ready to defend and accompany me. We reveled in the sandbox, made memories on the playground, and even tackled our homework side by side. Our inseparable connection solidified, and by the time we reached junior high, we were each other's go-to companions, a decision that seemed natural given our constant togetherness. This arrangement alleviated any concerns about dating others. I didn't have to fret about my appearance being appealing enough to attract other suitors, and Caleb could sidestep the anxiety of asking another girl out. Together, we ventured into countless adventures, with one particularly memorable incident when we were both 10. Caleb dared me to sample his father's brandy, a taste I found quite unpleasant. My response was swift, ending with me vomiting and nursing a severe headache the following day. Caleb found endless amusement in teasing me about my ordeal, and I decided to feign forgetfulness, opting to play along with our tradition of lighthearted jests. This was the essence of our relationship, a constant interplay of jokes and good-natured teasing. Our unwavering presence in each other's lives led us to believe that we would remain steadfast companions, no matter the circumstances. Of course, we endured our fair share of teasing, especially from our families, who often witnessed our inseparability. People affectionately referred to us as Mr. and Mrs., a moniker we didn't pay much heed to at the time. In fact, I often entertained the idea that marrying Caleb in the future wouldn't be such a bad outcome. The prospect of marrying my best friend held a certain allure. When I daydreamed about my wedding, I envisioned myself walking down the aisle with my hand resting on Caleb's arm, as if it were a preordained destiny. It felt as though I had encountered my soulmate at the tender age of 4, setting me on a path towards marrying my perfect match. As we grew older, though, our dynamics began to shift. It was only natural that Caleb began spending more time with other boys, and I, too, developed friendships with other girls. Yet, amidst these changes, my unwavering connection with Caleb remained steadfast. He was, and always would be, my best friend. One fateful day, Caleb arrived at my house with a new friend in tow. "Hey Audrey," he greeted me. "This is Xavier." When I laid eyes on Xavier, my heart skipped a beat. He was the most striking boy I had ever seen, with his golden hair radiating like a halo when touched by the sun's rays. It was as if I were gazing upon an angel. "Hi, Audrey." Xavier greeted me with a handshake that seemed to generate sparks of electricity between us. Caleb asked if they could spend the day with me, and I readily agreed. Xavier, as it turned out, was an exceptional person in every regard. His good looks only enhanced his charm, as he exuded a warm and friendly demeanor. He possessed a wonderful sense of humor and was an attentive listener. Whenever Caleb and I engaged in one of our playful arguments, Xavier was there with a perpetual smile. I couldn't deny that I began to develop a small crush on Xavier. How could I not? His striking looks were matched only by his kindness. For several months, the three of us became inseparable. We watched movies together, had lighthearted picnics in the park, and shared many memorable moments. As the summer before college approached, our parents gave us the green light for a trip, just the three of us. We ventured to Xavier's family's beach house for a night of bonding. After dinner, Xavier introduced some drinks, and despite knowing we weren't of legal drinking age, we indulged, giggling and laughing the night away. I wasn't accustomed to drinking, and it hit me hard and fast. Before I knew it, I found myself nestled on the couch, cuddling with Xavier. "You're so handsome," I murmured as I gently caressed his cheek. It became apparent that Xavier was growing uncomfortable with the situation. "Audrey, I think you've had enough to drink," he told me, making an effort to move my hand away. However, I resisted his attempt and did something incredibly impulsive, the most aggressive act of my life. I pressed my lips firmly against Xavier's, initiating a passionate kiss. I couldn't be certain whether it was his first kiss, but it was definitely mine. The spell was broken only when the unmistakable sound of something breaking reached my ears. As I looked up, my eyes met Caleb's shocked expression. Somehow, that look from Caleb served as a wake-up call. I blushed intensely, hastily stood up, and stammered an apology. "Sorry, I think I've had enough to drink," I mumbled to the boys before making a quick retreat to the bathroom, where I locked myself in. I splashed cold water on my face, desperately attempting to clear my head. An overwhelming sense of guilt washed over me, especially in front of Caleb. When I recalled the expression on his face, I saw a mix of anger, disbelief, and a hint of disgust. I grappled with my feelings for Caleb. I loved him, but was it more than friendship? Should I have kissed him instead of Xavier? My impulsive act with Xavier felt like a massive mistake, but his undeniable charm had entranced me. Was this what it felt like to love two different people at the same time? My emotions were tangled in confusion, and I dreaded the thought of facing both of them again the following morning. During breakfast the next day, Xavier attempted to broach the topic. "Audrey, about last night," he began, but Caleb interjected swiftly. "She doesn't remember," he asserted, taking charge of the situation. "Audrey did some silly things when we drank some of my father's brandy back when we were 10, but she always forgot about it the next day." Although I vividly recalled kissing Xavier, I chose to play along. I lied and claimed that I had no recollection of the events from the previous night. It seemed easier to feign ignorance and pretend that nothing had transpired. That memorable night marked the last time we spent together for a considerable period. I enrolled in a different college than the boys, knowing that I would only see them during holiday breaks. I would miss the constant presence of Caleb in my life. Nonetheless, it wasn't all negative. We continued to exchange text messages and phone calls regularly. I was relieved to hear that Caleb and Xavier still hung out. However, I was disheartened to learn that neither of them would be returning home for Christmas or spring break. Caleb mentioned that they had made plans with their friends, and I reminded him to stay responsible and avoid kissing random girls. "You're the random kisser," he teased me, a playful reminder of that embarrassing night. I was relieved he couldn't see my face, as I still vividly remembered that moment. However, I didn't see the boys again until the following summer. On my first day back home, I heard frantic knocking at my bedroom door. I rushed to open it, and there stood Caleb, tanned and wearing a warm smile. I immediately embraced him tightly, and then I felt another pair of arms enveloping us. It was Xavier. It was a heartwarming three-way hug from a group of reunited old friends. That summer, it felt as though we had never been apart. We spent every day together, attempting to make up for the lost time. Despite my excitement, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy about what Caleb and Xavier had experienced without me at their college. Xavier asked, "What about you, Audrey? Did you break any hearts at your fancy college?" I let out a slightly exaggerated laugh and shook my head. With Caleb's return, I realized that he was the reason why I hadn't fallen in love with anyone at college. No one understood me the way Caleb did, and I could see that he felt the same way as he looked at me. One day, Caleb surprised me by asking Xavier to head home early. "I need to talk to Audrey," he explained to Xavier, who nodded and left. As Caleb and I embarked on a walk together, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I wondered what he was going to say. Was he finally going to confess his feelings for me? Were we about to become a couple? We embarked on a walk through the park, found a quiet bench, and he gently held my hand. Caleb began speaking with utmost seriousness, and I felt a rush of anticipation. This was it. He didn't care about that drunken kiss with Xavier. He was going to tell me that he loved me too. "I love you, Audrey," he declared, and my face lit up with joy. "I've loved you since we were kids, and there's something I've wanted to share with you for a long time." I was brimming with happiness, fully expecting him to profess his love for me in return. But then he said something that completely blindsided me. "Audrey, I'm gay." I couldn't believe my ears. How could Caleb be gay? He had just told me that he loved me. However, the shock didn't stop there. Caleb revealed that he was in love with Xavier, and that Xavier reciprocated his feelings. I sat there in stunned silence, processing what Caleb had just shared. It was the last thing I had expected him to say. I reminded him of the time when he seemed upset about my kiss with Xavier, and I had thought he was jealous because he was in love with me. Caleb chuckled and said, "I knew you were only pretending to forget about that night. I was trying to save your dignity." He continued, "I also know you kissed Xavier because he's so handsome." I thought that's why I fell in love with him, but it's not just his looks. You know how amazing Xavier is. He's truly special. Caleb seemed to understand me better than anyone else. However, there was something he didn't know. He wasn't aware that I had fallen in love with him. Caleb often talked about his desire to have a family of his own, and I knew he had always felt incomplete because he never knew his own parents. Caleb had been afraid to come out to others, particularly his grandparents, and he kept seeking reassurance from me, asking if I still understood and if I could remain his best friend. My heart was in turmoil, and I couldn't bring myself to answer him. It felt as though my chest was being squeezed, and I couldn't bear the weight of the situation. So I abruptly got up and left. The humiliation was just too much to handle. I didn't see Caleb or Xavier for the remainder of that summer. When it was finally time to return to school, I breathed a sigh of relief. Back at college, I threw myself into a dating frenzy, rarely going home. I didn't want to confront anyone from my past, especially if the news about Caleb being gay had spread all over town. I couldn't bear the thought of people feeling sorry for me. I dated multiple guys, as if trying to prove that men could fall in love with me, and that I didn't need Caleb's love. Ultimately, I ended up in a relationship with Wesley, who became my boyfriend. Then, one day, I discovered I was pregnant, and I felt like I had no other option but to return home. Tearfully, I packed my bags and went back. My life felt like it was spiraling out of control. Wesley was as shocked as I was about the pregnancy, and neither of us wanted to be parents at that moment. We were both too young and unprepared for such a responsibility. I had dreams of marrying a wonderful guy, going on a honeymoon, building a career, and not getting tied down with a child at that stage in my life. I don't know who called Caleb, but suddenly he was back by my side. He knew I was struggling and hurting. We cried together, sharing our feelings of loneliness. I confided in him, expressing how isolated I felt. Caleb then shared something that profoundly resonated with me. I felt alone for a long time too. It's not easy being gay in this town. I was well aware that people would judge me for how I had initially reacted when Caleb came out to me. I had hoped for his support, but it dawned on me how gravely I had let him down. I had always claimed Caleb and I were best friends, yet I had abandoned him when he needed me the most. The weight of my actions began to sink in. Caleb, however, was understanding and compassionate. "It's okay, Audrey," he reassured me. He acknowledged that my initial reaction had been a shock, but he also expressed his love for me. He emphasized that his being gay wouldn't change the fact that I would always be his best friend. Then, Caleb broached the topic of my pregnancy. He told me that having a baby could be one of the most wonderful things in a person's life. However, I confessed that I didn't want this baby. Angrily, Caleb asked if I meant I wanted an abortion. Tears streaming down my face, I nodded. Deep down, I knew I could never go through with it. But at that moment, I felt trapped, unsure of what other options were available. Caleb, my unwavering support, encouraged me. "You can do this. I'll be with you every step of the way. You won't be alone," he assured me. He reminded me that this baby would be surrounded by love from everyone around us. He implored me not to give the baby away, emphasizing his own upbringing without parents. I agreed, and gradually, with Caleb's unwavering presence by my side, I began to feel stronger. He became my rock, the source of my strength. Then, one day, Caleb shared more news with me. He and Xavier had decided to get married. I cried tears of joy, genuinely happy for him. I knew deep down that I could never have Caleb romantically, but our friendship endured despite my past mistakes. Seeing him happy brought me a sense of contentment. Somehow, I found peace with the idea of Caleb and Xavier being together. My love for both of them was strong enough that I realized there was no room for jealousy when genuine love was involved. Caleb would always hold a special place in my heart as my first love, and if my love for him was true, then I should be genuinely happy for him. They decided to tie the knot a few months before I gave birth, and Caleb asked me to give him away. Even though his grandparents disapproved of their marriage, I wanted their wedding to be filled with love and support, just as it should be. In my mind, I envisioned myself in a beautiful dress, walking Caleb down the aisle in his tuxedo, with Xavier waiting at the altar. Letting Caleb go was heart-wrenching, but if I had to lose him to someone, I couldn't have chosen a better person than Xavier. They didn't even go on a honeymoon. Instead, my two boys stayed with me throughout my pregnancy. Xavier told me how lucky I was, adding that he'd be content with being the baby's favorite uncle. Caleb, of course, wouldn't have it. He proclaimed that he would be this baby's favorite person. Their warmth and devotion touched my heart deeply. The baby wasn't even born yet, and they were already embracing their roles as fathers-to-be. Xavier agreed to give me anything I wanted, showing just how dedicated they were to making this journey as smooth as possible. It was a remarkable experience. I felt like I had two incredibly supportive partners by my side. They took care of me throughout my pregnancy journey, from holding my hair back when I was nauseous to gently applying lotion to my expanding belly to prevent stretch marks. Even in the middle of the night, they ventured out to fulfill my cravings, like the infamous pickles. When labor finally came, I summoned the courage to face the pain head-on. My determination was fueled by the desire to provide the best life possible for my baby. Eventually, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. I anxiously awaited the awakening of my maternal instincts, wondering if I could fulfill the role I knew was right. Caleb and Xavier visited the hospital, and as I saw them tenderly cradling our baby, they looked like the epitome of a perfect family. With a lump in my throat, I mustered the words, "I'm finally giving you a wedding present. I'm sorry it took me so long." With that, I handed Xavier a stack of papers, which were for the adoption of my baby. I had decided to relinquish my rights as her mother and entrust her to Caleb and Xavier. In all the years I had known Caleb, I had never seen him shed a tear until that very moment. It was then that I truly realized how deeply I loved him and how profound my affection was for all three of them. I was giving my baby to the best parents in the world, and it was a bittersweet but ultimately fulfilling decision.